Hey everybody, we're a couple minutes past the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. First off, I want to say thank you to everybody for joining today's webcast. We appreciate you taking time out of your day, especially as we're all gearing up to enter into the much anticipated holiday break. Appreciate you joining us. Before we get going, I just want to let the audience know that we have placed your lines on mute in order to reduce background noise. So if you have any questions or comments, please use the chat feature, and we'll be monitoring that window throughout the presentation, and we'll also spend the last 5 to 10 minutes going through and answering as many questions as possible. We'll also be following up via email on any that we're not able to get to today. In addition, we'll be posting a recording of this event on our website, so please feel free to go to www.astound.ai and check out the recording, and also feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions. Without further ado, I want to introduce today's special guest, Ritesh Dalal, the founder and CEO of Intellective. Ritesh has a deep expertise in building, implementing, and increasing the value of employee service solutions with over a decade of experience in that area. Ritesh, it's a pleasure having you on. Would you like to say hello to the audience, introduce yourself, and maybe provide just a bit of background, a bit of your background, and talk a little bit about what you're doing in your current role?
Absolutely, yes. So pleasure to be here. So thank you for having me. And hey, everybody. So I'm Ritesh Dalal. So I'm one of the founders and CEO of Intellective. And Intellective, our mission is to generate massive value through innovation. So what we've done over the years is that we have realized that we can use technology to actually not just improve the end customer experience, but also from internally in large organizations as an employee experience. So with that, what we did is we are now technology partners with ServiceNow, and I would say we are one of the trailblazers when it comes to bringing UX-driven, employee-centric innovation onto the platform, and by using the ServiceNow platform in very non-traditional ways. And over the years, we've seen this happen in a number of large organizations. So when I started Intellective, that was one of our main missions, which is that we want to go ahead and consumerize the enterprise. And so that's precisely what we've been doing over the past couple of years, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Great, thanks for that, Ritesh. It's great to have you on. Our strategies certainly align here at Astound. We're trying to make sure that we're modernizing, the employee experience, which is a perfect segue into sort of what brings us all here today. And that's to talk a bit about, the top trends and priorities that employee support leaders should be planning for and thinking about and budgeting for in 2019. Ritesh, what are you seeing and hearing from your clients in terms of key objectives being targeted for the new year?
So there's a number of things that actually get discussed around, and we've seen in 2018 a lot of trends kind of have been starting to kind of come towards how do we actually make things smarter, more real time, and things like that. And we have customers that are replacing traditional equipment with like smartphones so that they can do a lot more. The employees at that end location can do a lot more things with them. At the same time, we've been involved in solutions that actually involve things like face recognition or fingerprint reading for tablet-based solutions for workers that are on a factory floor, so that they can just go quickly do whatever they need to do and get back to work. And it kind of really reduces the churn on having to have a laptop or log in there and do something with it. Because the trends that we have seen is that the workforce is now getting mobile, right? So we have about, as we have on the slide here, which is we have the mobile workforce is going to increase to about almost half by 2022. So we really have to kind of brace for that and really kind of make solutions that will service that mobile workforce. And self-service is one of the other things. So now the days for trying to pick up the phone, being on hold, and trying to actually get the problem solved, those are kind of behind us. And the next thing that we have to do is really kind of bring self-service front and center, because people are getting smarter, they are getting savvier, they are getting more and more used to just using technology to solve problems. And that way now self-service is going to also become one of the primary things that we want to bring here and innovate on, so that we can let our end users or our customers really kind of just solve their own problems. And that saves time, energy, money, all kinds of things, especially both on the organization side, on the sales side, as well as customer satisfaction side. And then the last thing that we'll actually be seeing is that people are now working their own hours. People are now working in their own locations. And so with that, we also have to kind of come up with the right kind of solutions around how do we support this mobile workforce? How do we support the new age workforce that is actually going to go ahead and be super productive, but not in that cube that's at a particular location, but they can just be about anywhere and get their job done and do it right.
Yeah, it's really interesting, as you pointed out, that these percentages, we've been talking about mobile for a while now, but these percentages are either getting very close to 50% or they're over it, right? Which means it's no longer the exception, right? It's becoming the rule. It's interesting, looking at this, the flexible hours as the top workplace benefit. I look at a lot of sort of different surveys around, trends in the workplace, and it's amazing if you look at it, especially when you get into specific age demographics, that what employees are looking for in terms of benefits. Salary is oftentimes not the number one. As a matter of fact, it can be pretty far down the list in terms of picking things like flexible hours, remote working, which is adding a completely new dynamic into how we go about supporting employees.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And we recently actually kicked off another portion of our business, which was staffing and augmentation. And it is exactly what you just said. We have actually been speaking to so many candidates and actually kind of trying to figure out where is their level of motivation, what is really driving them to kind of switch their jobs and things like that. And yes, the salary, the compensation, every one of those things do play a role, but they are no longer the primary motivator, the primary driver around people either looking or switching their jobs or things like that. It's actually now folks are looking at, are the companies looking to make them successful? Are the companies looking to invest in developing them? Are the companies going to go ahead and give them the right kind of flexibility so they can have that work-life balance and everything else around it? And kind of looking at work as part of their lives rather than a job that they just have to go and do. And that is a trend that we're also going to see in the employment side of things as we get into the next year.
Yeah, super fascinating. This direct correlation that's getting more and more solidified over the years, between self-service, support for mobile service, and retainment of employees. Super interesting.
Yes.
And so, talking about, employee experience first, rightfully so, right? It's super important, but we sometimes forget that service management professionals are also employees, right? And they want to have intuitive interfaces, and they want to be productive, and they want to be set up for success in their jobs. What are you seeing in terms of, okay, so we have sort of this new dynamic, or maybe a dynamic that's been there for a while in terms of wanting real-time support, that consumerized look and feel of gaining support inside of a company as an employee that you get as a consumer. How is that changing, or is it changing, how service organizations position themselves? What sort of challenges are they coming up against as employees change their behaviors?
So there's a lot of things around it's interesting that you talk about like the support staff, right? And a lot of times when we talk about employees, it's actually the employees that are just out there doing what they need to do, and whether it is a sales organization, whether it's an HR organization, whether it is a technology delivery organization. But when we talk about customer support, when we talk about sort of network support, those kind of organizations that actually exist within larger companies, they are kind of still behind the scenes. And those are the fulfillers, as you would call it, right? So we have a development team, they're developers, but they're building things, versus you have a customer support staff, they're just fulfilling the tickets, or we have the operation centers and things like that. So now those employees and their successes are something that actually will start to get surfaced as we go into the next year and kind of the years to follow that, because that is one of the things that is getting impacted quite a bit as of right now, because of the solutions that exist in the world today and how the people, as far as the employees go or the customers, what are they using to actually interact with these solutions of the company. And one of the other things is when we talk about employee experience, it is not just about that employee or any employee within the company, their interaction with, say, the HR department or their interaction with their immediate manager. Now the employee experience actually kind of permeates in just about every touch point that an employee has with their organization. So how does somebody else who is outside the organization perceive this company? So if I'm working for a company XYZ and I meet somebody out in the market and I say I work for X, and their impression of that company X is also part of the employee experience because people are now identifying with the companies that they work for even more and more, a whole lot more pride in the companies that they work for. And so with that, the experience really touches every aspect of the employee, not just about their interaction with what is my compensation, am I getting my bonus on time, or do I have enough PTO, and those kind of things. So with that, now going back into the support conversation that we started, is that yes, there is that time to resolution of tickets is definitely going up. And the reason it's going up is because now there are so many more devices, there are so many more ways that people, whether it is employees or customers, can interact with different endpoints that the companies actually expose out. And so with that, if somebody has an issue with an email setup, they could be on a mobile phone of X brand versus X operating system, and with all of those permutations and combinations, trying to actually find the right kind of information, escalating this, whatever the issue is, or the resolution of it, up the chain where they really need to kind of get something fixed, this time keeps on ticking and keeps on getting added onto. And this is something that employees are looking at, especially the support employees are looking for help from the IT organization or from the development organization or a company in general to actually build the right kind of solution so that they can expedite their jobs, and which will then reduce that time to resolution of the tickets, more employee sort of satisfaction, at least on this side of the fence here, and then trying to actually say, okay, we are getting more and more successful, and then celebrating those successes as they really go further.
Yeah, that's definitely in line with sort of what we're hearing from our customers as well, and folks that we spend time with, that this complexity that we talked about in the previous slide in terms of more mobility, more mobile apps, just the way that customers or employees want to consume services, and the services that we're delivering are becoming increasingly complex and dynamic. And without really sort of making changes in terms of like what we're going to get into here shortly around the people, technology, and processes that support that, it becomes very challenging for these support organizations to scale that new experience that's being expected. And as a result, this is what we're seeing, right? These mean time to resolution going up, cost per ticket going up because they're just getting inundated, and it's taking longer. There's more tickets, they're more complex, they're not quite sure where these issues need to be resolved, so they're hopping around. And this all impacts many different facets of the organization, but in support organizations specifically, these trends that we have up here on the screen in terms of morale going down on the service desk. 1 in 4 feel like their efforts aren't being recognized by management or valued. Yeah. And retention, right? Even on the service desk side, we talked earlier about employees themselves, but on the sort of the customer side of the service experience. But on the agent side, right, they're turning over more. And when you have complexity in the environment, you have these higher expectations, and at the same time your support staff are turning over, having a high turnover. That's not a good mix. I think we'd all agree, right? And it's like, I think a lot of the folks that we're talking to are trying to figure out, what do we need to do now that these trends are becoming, like we talked about, more the rule than the exception? What do we need to start doing in the next year to start getting ahead of this and really, not thinking of it as one-offs, but really the new environment?
Yes, absolutely. And that's kind of one of the other things that kind of brings us right to people within the company as well, which is around what we look at traditionally is that we have a sales organization, we have an IT organization, we have customer support organization, we have some back office IT support organization. And we see that people doing the sales are the sales team. But that is not necessarily the case. Every person in the company, if you are working for the company, you are in sales. And the difference is the audience that you actually have. So if you're talking to people within other departments of the company, then you're actually selling yourself, your department, the services that your departments actually deliver, versus the moment you actually start to talk about your company out into the market or people who are outside the company, then you're actually selling the company. And you just constantly, that is always on. And that is one thing that if we instill within our employees, then what is going to happen is that they are really going to feel like they are the cheerleaders for the organization. At the same time, they are the cheerleaders for themselves. And they will continue to then go ahead and be happy in their jobs, number one, at the same time also strive to be better and better as they go along. And so that kind of brings us right here as investing in the people. So from a company perspective, we have to look at what is really happening, what are the new trends, how are we looking to grow these employees out. So some of the things around service management side of things is around these new frameworks that are coming up. So ITIL is the methodology I'd say most of the companies are using for their ITSM, where they're kind of doing the technology management in general. And so there's a new framework for ITIL that's going to come up, a new version. So that is one of the things that we can actually think about, having these support staff as well as people even in the development organizations get trained up so that they know what they're doing or they know what they're talking about when they are not just doing their current solution to a problem, but actually just out there as well when they're talking either across the organization or outside the organization. And the same thing as we talked about, that since everybody is in sales, let's kind of invest a little bit more into communication skills of our employees, invest a little bit more into the marketing side of things, presentation skills. And every one of those skills, as we kind of add to, it not only adds to the employee's sort of profile, but at the same time, it actually adds to the cumulative profile of the company in general. Because a company's visibility or a company's impression is in that one email that gets sent outside. And what does that say, right? Is it articulated properly? Is it written up the right way? Or if you're sending in a PowerPoint presentation, is that set up the right way, right? So we want to make sure that the employees that are in every one of these roles are getting the right kind of training so they feel like they're being developed. And then at the same time, the company itself benefits from it as well. And then one of the other things around that is processes. So with the processes, there is one thing which is, yes, there is a lot of different processes that actually work or don't work for different companies. And trying to identify the company culture, trying to identify how are we doing the work, how are we seeing successes. And then even experimenting, taking up small projects and really experimenting the newer styles of work that a lot of other organizations have actually seen success in, or even be one of the first ones to really kind of try something out. But what that builds up is that if you are actually that tiger team that's going to kind of try out something, there is that sense of camaraderie. So you are actually investing in people, at the same time you're kind of building a sense of community within the company itself, and then at the same time trying to kind of really find what really works and increase the output.
Yeah, that's great. I really like the idea of the marketing element and the business-focused courses. I mean, we've spent so much time as service management professionals beefing up on sort of the ITIL, and which is great. We need those, and they're on this list here for a reason, right? But I've worked with some really innovative companies in the past and service departments who have really taken the marketing bit to heart. Instead of just always being known for those operational metrics, like, we keep the servers up, and they're going out and being proactive. Like, here's the new technology we're going to be rolling out. They'll put out campaigns like a marketing organization would do, right? Giving FAQs on new technology, promoting their wins. Instead of going to the business and just talking about uptime of servers, they're talking about what actual campaigns inside the company, whether it's supporting sales, marketing, HR, what have you. They're promoting those successes and marketing themselves as a business driver.
Yes, absolutely. And actually see, and it's not just here when we're talking about a business-focused course or a service management framework. There's also around the technology organizations that exist within these companies. How do we transition that org into the next level or the next generation of frameworks used over there? I mean, PayPal is a really good example. They used to be on kind of old, Java payment technology at some point, and then they moved over into this newer sort of Node.js driven real-time framework that's what the new PayPal systems run on. And what they ended up doing is that instead of really just going out in the market and trying to hire people who knew this particular framework, while they got the experts to come in, they literally trained their entire sort of Java development workforce to then go in and learn JavaScript, become really good at the next thing that the company is going to be doing. And that investment really paid off for the company, where they are now really one of the companies that actually is in the real-time processing of the payment information and things like that. Just recently, I think last week, is something where they launched that now you can have money sitting in your PayPal account available right away on your debit card, which is through your bank.
Wow.
And they have been able to kind of do a lot of those innovations really because they are, again, one of those companies that invest in their development talent in a way that they're always up to date and they're always doing the right thing that they need to do.
That's a great example. So in terms of processes, right? So we're talking, we've talked a bit about sort of what investments we need to make in people, but how do they take those learnings from different forms of training, maybe not so traditional paths of training that we just talked about, and start to apply that inside their organizations to restructure their processes? What should they look at? What are you hearing in terms of process improvement?
Process improvement is such an interesting topic when it comes to these large organizations because everybody loves to talk about that. And everybody loves to talk about the process and kind of has an input in the process. It's kind of like UX as well, right? Because everybody is a user, so everybody has an opinion on UX. And just like that, everybody is kind of part of the process at some point, so they have an opinion on the process itself. And what tends to happen is that depending on how the companies look at the processes that are in there, they really need to figure out that who are the real stakeholders that are going to get affected as a process is really being implemented or improved upon. And one of the other things that they have to look at is that are we really closing the loop on it? Because there is always these initiatives that get kicked off where, okay, we're going to now try Kanban, or we're going to try Scrum, and we're going to do any one of those things. And are they really, once that kicks off and then it kind of just becomes the new norm and people are just doing it, but what really stops happening there is that the loop being closed back, like that employee journey that we're talking about, which is, yes, we initiated this, this is what actually happened, this is what transpired, this is what we kind of did the course correction on, and then here is the final result. So that is one of the things that is something that we'll actually see in the next coming year or even the time further, where these processes that are actually being tweaked upon, because you cannot really take an agile framework and just drop it on top of a company and say, you know what, this is just going to work. Especially when you have things like, okay, we have legal that's in the process. Trying to get legal to become agile so that if you're trying to kind of push out some knowledge articles that legal has to look at, and trying to say, okay, we're going to do 2-week releases here, and legal has to kind of get back to me before this cycle really ends, that doesn't quite work. So then you're actually on this agile/waterfall type of a process. And so there's every one of those things, and we have to really find a happy balance between who is really involved in this particular sort of course of action, and then how do we make the most of it that way. So that's one of the things there. And then on the other side, there's also things around how much customization or how much personalization do we need to really put into these processes so that it actually really gets tailored towards a particular sort of use case versus there has to be standards because we have to have a PMO type of an organization in a company so that project managers can belong into one organization. Every project manager can do their job. Doesn't matter what project they're on. So that's one of the other balance that we have to kind of really strike as well.
Yeah, I think about like this, the sort of this quote on here where user experience is more than UI, it's end to end, and we have employee journey mapping. I think it's really important, right? Because we were talking earlier about employees having a new expectation on how they can consume services, and we talked a lot about mobile and folks working after hours and that sort of dynamic. But I think there's something to be said for making sure that it goes beyond just taking your existing processes and putting them on in a mobile format, right? If I'm still submitting a ticket and waiting and filling out forms and sending emails, but it's mobile and I can do it 24/7, that's still not really the type of improvement that I'm looking for in terms of an employee. I'm really looking for much more personalization. I don't want that same process that's been there, but just in a mobile format. Are you hearing that as well? That this is more sort of personalization? It goes beyond just the table stakes of making something mobile.
Yes, absolutely, and that's one of the things, right? Where personalization is such an interesting word. It actually gets thrown around quite a bit in just about every context there is these days, right? And one of the things that we have to kind of figure out is where does personalization actually give you the most bang for the buck versus standardization give you the most bang for the buck, right? So when we were talking about processes earlier on a larger scale around, say we are doing an agile development or we are a waterfall development shop, then those are the processes where we want to kind of figure out that there is more standardization than personalization. So we are not actually kind of making a process that is tailored to this particular team versus that particular team versus that particular team. So we are kind of having those standards as a company. But now when it comes to the end experience of an employee, personalization becomes key. Because if I'm an employee going in there and looking at my company portal, what I want to look at is when is my next holiday, or what is the trading window open, and who is my HR contact for the location that I'm in. So in that particular case, personalization becomes really important. Where if I'm traveling to Denver, Colorado, and I log into my company portal, that portal should realize that yes, this is Ritesh. He's traveling from California. He's in Colorado now, and he is in this particular building. So if I have any questions about where to go eat or how do I get my building access, it should give me those contacts right away, and it should also give me what is really happening at this Colorado location rather than giving me information about my office back in California, right? So that's really a prime example of personalization. So that is one of the other things that we will get to see a whole lot more of, where applications and the things that the company actually has that are sort of for the employees, they are more and more personalized. They are smarter so that it is very, very contextual about not just who you are, but where you are and when you are. And that is something that is really going to actually make these employees excited about and say, this is a company that is really trying to make me more productive, get me the right information when I need it. And we'll talk a lot more about things around what are the technology solutions that actually are enabling these kind of things. And that is something that from a process or personalization perspective, I think it kind of brings it home, which is you personalize on an employee level, but you standardize on a company level. And so not kind of introduce too much of like one-offs in the company's general processes, but definitely kind of make it uber personalized for that employee or that end user so that when they are doing the work, they kind of see the experience similar to what they would have seen in an Amazon when they log in and they're really seeing, okay, we know what you do, and here is something for you. And that is what the companies need to kind of also strive to get at.
Yeah, so if I was to summarize so far, I think what I'm picking up in terms of these three ways to build an employee-centric culture, it starts with people, investing in people in terms of new ways of training and giving them the tools to support this new environment so they can be successful and so can their customers. Then taking those learnings back and really going deep on looking at what the existing processes are, how to make those personal where they're needed to be personal, standardize where standardization makes sense, but sort of looking at that whole customer journey in terms of how does an employee expect to receive services end to end. And then once you've sort of looked at those processes, then go out and start assessing, okay, based on what I know about my environment, where we are today, where we want to be tomorrow, then looking at what are the right technologies to support that.
Yes, absolutely. And that is one thing kind of that brings us here with the technologies, and what kind of investments do we want to make in the technology side of things so that we can support these employees, and we can support what we were kind of talking about earlier, which is, both the people and the processes. And this is where the insights, right, things that Astound has been doing for quite a bit, right, where looking at the data, really coming up with the right kind of insights, and not just insights that actually give you information, but insights that give you actionable information. So really knowing that this is what needs to be done next versus this is the state of affairs as of right now, right? So those are two different types of insights. And so the predictive insights, trying to actually kind of look at the trends and really say, predict this is possibly something that's likely to happen, but at the same time say last time when something like this happened, this is what worked. And so kind of investing in that particular technology, looking ahead, that can kind of peek into the future, so to speak, will definitely be very helpful as well, because with that, we can drive that intelligent automation, right, which is what we call point of need. One of the things that we worked with a customer a couple of years ago, in fact, so they were kind of ahead of their times when it comes to things like this, where they would figure out it was a trading software, and if a customer, an end customer, was actually on this online trading platform, and they spent more than about a minute or two on a trade ticket. So they started to fill it out, but they didn't quite completely fill it. Or if they were on a particular field off that trade ticket, and they were now kind of just either stalling, fumbling, or just weren't sure what to pick. We had basically we had an avatar. We had actually a chatbot, a virtual agent that would actually pop right up and say, do you need help with that particular field? I see that you haven't really picked an option there, and can we help you move forward with it? So that is kind of a prime example of like point of need, really identifying where if somebody actually is needing help, or otherwise anticipating when somebody is going to need help. So we can even kind of look at page flows and where people are in using their applications. And at some point we can realize that, this is the trend that has been, which is when somebody goes here, here, and here, we start to see a lot of tickets show up from this particular page. And really then kind of just create an interaction point saying, oh, by the way, if you're looking for this button, it's over there. And so those kind of point of need type technology solutions will really help get the right satisfaction levels from the people who are using this with any of these services that we actually have out there.
Yeah,
and
I really love this concept
of
point of need. Sorry, Ritesh.
No,
I just wanted to highlight that point of need. I really love that. A lot of the customers that we work with also bring that up. This dynamic of, let's say, for example, you have a sales professional, right, and they're based on the West Coast. They fly east, right? They're going to a big client meeting to do a presentation. They can't get into their system, or they can't access their share drive where their PowerPoint is. They send in a ticket, right? Back west, the service desk isn't going to be online for another few hours, right? So the service professional will figure out a way, right? They'll usually just sort of wing it, go without the PowerPoint, which isn't ideal. Then the service desk comes online, maybe 2-3 hours later, finally gets to that ticket. They got, 2 hours or whatever their SLA is to resolve something like that. Typically that's level 1, so it'll be more than 2 hours. They go in, they resolve it. To them, they're celebrating, right? Well, we resolved it. We maybe even beat the SLA. So I think there's been a disconnect between, okay, how are we measuring ourselves as a service organization? Because a lot of times we're celebrating success because we're meeting SLAs, but the business is viewing it in a completely different light because they're expecting point of need.
Yes. And that is something that, as you said, right, there is password reset is one of those things that is kind of a prime example for something like this. Because in the recent years or months, right, we've seen so many security breaches. We have seen so many of those, data leaks and things like that. So when something like that happens, most of the companies, the way they kind of go about it is they drop a sledgehammer, right? Okay, fine. Everybody is now forced to do a two-factor authentication, or everybody is now needs to have that little key that they stick into their laptop and tap on it every time they log in, right? So when we start to introduce more complex technology for people that really need ease of use, we have to be able to also be available to support that at any given time that they need support for. And that is where we will have to invest in the right kind of technology solutions so that given the complexity that just got introduced, how do I still make that complexity completely disappear for my end user? And that is something that will actually really drive it home, and that is something that is really going to make these employees feel like, yes, my company is taking the right measures from a security perspective, but at the same time, they are not putting that burden on us. And that will also, that kind of hits everything, right? That kind of hits the employee satisfaction, that kind of hits the right processes, that hits the right technology, right? And that is one of those things that if we kind of really just internalize, we'll be able to kind of get right to the bottom of every one of these core things and really just start to make the difference.
Yeah, agreed. I think we've tried to solve some of these problems in the past with service catalogs, knowledge articles, but if knowledge is dispersed in multiple different repositories and self-service is really static, not personal, and it's taken me longer to find what I need than it would be just to circumvent the process and maybe just go and download an application myself, and not involve IT at all, then most folks are going to go the path of least resistance when it comes to getting their job done, right? So, and I think that's what's happened with some of these initiatives like Portal and Knowledge is that they've just been, so kind of dispersed and static that folks end up a lot of times not utilizing them.
Yeah, and I think you hit it right on the head there, right? So speaking of knowledge, there is this thing of the whole concept of the federated knowledge search. Most organizations, the knowledge is spread up it's not just in this one knowledge base, right, or in this one location where you have multiple knowledge bases. You can have knowledge sitting in your OneDrive. You can have knowledge sitting in a Box folder. You can have knowledge sitting in Dropbox. There can be multiple different locations where people are storing this information. And if we actually come up with a way of saying, okay, you know what, you have this employee portal and you can search every possible source of a knowledge or a document that might be residing somewhere, then you actually make it so that, imagine now you're in a customer service type of a role, you get a call coming in, you're in one place trying to make that one search and get to that solution or get to that next step for this person calling in rather than trying to say, well, please hold on, let me try here, versus, okay, now I didn't quite find anything here, so now let me go ahead and try to look for something over here. And so that federated knowledge search and those kind of things are something that will also definitely help when it comes to making sure that we are trying to do the right thing for the employees, making sure we're trying to make them successful.
Makes a lot of sense. So we've covered a lot of new things coming into the environment, support processes, technology, expectations on the employee. How do we measure differently? If this is so much new things happening in the environment, we obviously can't measure the same way we have in terms of knowing if we're successful or not. What are you seeing in terms of new metrics that support organizations are looking at for the new year and beyond to start doing some self-assessment?
So that's one of the things that we actually kind of look at is, yes, the service utilization is definitely one of those, okay, fine, is this service really being utilized versus, whether, like the example that you had, which is I'm looking for software and I cannot get the IT to really install it on my computer, I'm going to go download it on my own. So how do we actually make it easy for that IT service or create a self-service type of a mechanism so that we are doing that, device management and kind of installing software which is vetted by the company and it is secure. So those kind of things. But then again, from a self-service and adoption and those things will definitely come into the picture also. But one of the things that we have to really measure when it comes to self-service is the deflection metric. So how many tickets did we actually have before versus how many tickets we have now, right? And really looking at these tickets or the phone calls and things like that and trying to figure out that how many we were able to successfully deflect out to self-service, because that is really going to affect the bottom line. That is also going to affect the folks that are actually there doing that support. And how much of like real problems are they really solving versus somebody calling in for a problem that could have just been fixed by restarting a computer or something like that. I mean, it's funny enough like how many problems can actually just get fixed by doing a restart. So something on those lines.
Yeah, and we've always, kind of tied this to employee satisfaction, but as we kind of brought up earlier, I think it goes beyond just making sure employees are satisfied. It's really about making sure morale, really looking at those business drivers around retention and things like this that maybe we hadn't paid so much attention to before, especially as a support organization. I don't recall, even in my time, previous lives of managing IT support organizations, really keeping an eye on, what's the company's retention rate looking like and sort of correlating that back to, how we're performing in IT. But I think that's something for service organizations to start thinking about, because especially in the technology side and even in HR, right? People are staying in companies, as you pointed out, more because of the experience that they have, and we need to take that serious and really start measuring ourselves against that.
Yes, absolutely, and that's one of the other things around retention, which is most of the times the retentions really get attributed to compensation or benefits, but if we really look a little bit deeper in there, we'll try to kind of start to find out that the retention really is not just those two things, but it's actually a lot more. It is about how fulfilled are these employees really feeling, and this kind of goes back to how we started the conversation around, where these people are and what they're really trying to do. So, the mobile workforce and being able to work from just about anywhere where they are, trying to do things on their own versus trying to ask for help all the time. So every one of those things matter, and that is what is now accounting for these retention numbers rather than, just something saying, okay, we are the top payers or we have the best benefits.
Great. So for the folks on the line, I'm going to move into the Q&A portion here soon. I'm seeing quite a few questions coming in. So I do want to point out, though, if you're looking to address any of these one or three or all three of these ways to build an employee-centric culture and are interested in going a level deeper with myself and or Ritesh, please use the URL provided here to get in touch with us. And we'd be happy to go into a little bit more depth about what we've covered today at a high level. But, these are areas that, we've kind of heard from our customers and keeping our finger on the pulse of the industry. But happy to keep the conversation going and getting into, a deeper level. If you want to reach out to us, that's how to do so. So at this time, why don't we move into some of the Q&A. We'll answer at least a couple questions here live, and then we'll probably have to table the rest for email. So, Ritesh, one of the questions that came in is what specific tools can add value and engagement? So I think what they're probably talking about here is maybe in your experience, are you seeing any specific tools that folks are using to improve maybe communication and collaboration across maybe employees and maybe even within the support organization?
So there's definitely a number of tools that are out there that actually have been helping. We've seen customers move from things like Jabber to Slack, and that has actually kind of really helped the organizations. But then Slack actually seems to have a little bit of a learning curve, especially for the non-IT type of departments. And they're just using it just like Jabber. So they were just like, okay, what is the difference here? Like, I'm just using it exactly how it was earlier. So there is that, trying to really communicate the value of the tools. But one of the things that we have seen is, yes, implementing Slack across organizations has improved collaboration for sure. And then one of the other things is that because Slack being as sort of open from an API perspective and things like that, you could really extend it and really tie other systems into it. So we have had organizations that actually drove approvals through Slack. So you can just reply back and approve or reject something, or you can resolve incidents right inside of a Slack type of an environment. So that actually really helps from an organization perspective. Microsoft is doing a lot of great work on the Microsoft Teams and those other offerings that they have. And they are really trying to kind of also work towards this employee experience or a holistic employee experience because, Microsoft is that true original enterprise employee experience company with their SharePoint and, Outlook and Office 365 type of products. So they are doing a lot of good work on their side, and we'll actually see in the next couple of years or a couple of months to come where Microsoft would possibly be unveiling some of their newer offerings, and that would also be very beneficial for some of the companies. And the last one that comes to mind is Facebook Workplaces. We have seen customers have a lot of success with Facebook Workplaces, and there's a lot more collaboration that happens than any kind of other internal tool or even things like Confluence. But one of the things that we have to kind of be mindful of with that is that when we introduce something like a Facebook Workplace, the moderation piece does add a little bit of overhead for the organization. So we want to make sure that the content being posted there is in line with what the corporation or with the policies of the corporation.
Excellent. Well, we're up against time, so I want to be respectful to that. So I think at this point we have a lot of questions. We'll get to every one of them, and we'll be responding back via email. I'll also go ahead and put this link back up on the screen so that you know how to get in touch with us. You can also visit our site, www.astound.ai, for any questions that you may have, and to access the recording to today's live event. Ritesh, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insights with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And audience, thanks again for taking time out of your busy days to spend an hour or so with us. We appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you at our next live webcast. Have a great day and enjoy your holiday season. Bye.